All right, ladies and gentlemen, joining me today for Deep Depth Episode 5, a very special episode today here where we dive into the deep end of life. This man, graduating from Vanderbilt University, having a master's in leadership and organizational performance, a bachelor's in medicine, health, and society, worked his way up to become a professional football player for the Chicago Bears, fullback currently for Chicago Bears, just signed a 2-year extension with us. Ladies and gentlemen, joining me today, Khari, Blasingame. Khari, welcome to Deep Depth. Here we dive into the deep end of life. How are you doing today, sir?
Hey, man, I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good today. It's good to have you. It's an honor to have you, sir. Big time Chicago Bears fan. Obviously, I've studied your career along the way before leading up to this episode. And today's will be a very special episode today. You guys are going to be talking about his uprise to football and, any possible obstacles along the way. And also diving deep on his current podcast, Business of Athletes, which will be in the link in the description below of this video. So, Khari, to start off today, not to be, too cliche or anything to start off today's episode, what was it when you were growing up that caught your eye and wanted to become a football player? Were there any players that possibly inspired you to become a player one day? Or did you start off not crazy interested in football and it became an interest later on in your life?
Well, I was always interested in it, but I didn't play it until I was 10, right? So to answer that question, it was both. A lot of great players that I watched, from LaDainian Tomlinson, Brian Dawkins, Brian Westbrook, Donovan McNabb, Michael Vick, Ward Dunn, just all the guys, all of those, legends from the early thousands and 2010s, right? And then I just had a great time playing it when I finally got out there at the age of 10. I mean, I guess I say finally, but that's young too. But, so I just really loved playing it. And then I just watched a lot of the greats and, what they were able to do that was really inspiring. So that's what made me fall in love with it. I played baseball, basketball, but I really fell in love with football.
Football was one, absolutely, and it was sort of similar with me. So my first sport was soccer, being introduced to me. My parents being from Europe at the time, and then of course it was basketball later on, and then football was like my third sport I laid my eyes on. And at the time when I watched football, I believe I was around, it was like sixth grade, I believe, and the first football team I laid my eyes on before my hometown Bears was the Dallas Cowboys, the Eagles' rivals. And I don't know what it was, but as a kid at that time, just seeing the star in the helmet, the field, the players, I remember Tony Romo's on that team, Des Bryant, DeMarco Murray, Jason Wynn, one of my favorite tight ends of all time, one of my favorite players of all time. So I don't know what it was. It was just the Cowboys really stood out to me. But those are two really good teams, the Falcons and Eagles, tons of legends. My favorite Falcons player is the Tony Gonzalez, one of the greatest tight ends, if not the greatest tight end. That's a debate for another day.
Yeah, okay.
And, a huge fan, of Tony Gonzalez. And obviously Atlanta and Philly, full of football legends. So I'm sure, that inspiration definitely inspired you, to keep the course running in football. I'm definitely assuming, correct?
Yeah, man. And, it wasn't just, Atlanta and Philadelphia. It was a bunch of different guys from a bunch of different teams. I gravitated more to Atlanta and Philadelphia. Donovan McNabb, Michael Vick, I really liked them. But, yeah, man, it was, all of their games inspired me to, just play and have fun with it.
Absolutely. Now, when grinding in football, getting to college, was there any possible obstacles you faced when it came to balancing football with academics possibly? Because nowadays, I have a few buddies of mine, currently in high school, getting into college. There's been times with them where, they sort of had, some difficulties, balancing academics, with football or basketball, even, with their personal hobbies, whether they love to, game, stream, YouTube content, creating, photography, whatever, personal hobby that they have. So how would you say you balanced it out back in the day, and any advice to student athletes out there when it comes to time management with school and, of course, sports and any other hobbies they love to do?
Yeah, man, I would say, time management is all about priorities, right? So, you got to put the most time to the things you prioritize most. So, for me, I had my priorities set for me for a long time by my parents. We prioritize education. And so, it was easy to focus on that because it was already set for me and that was the standard. But, I think if you have a goal, man, you got to prioritize the most important things in order to get you to that goal. So, time management is great. Making sure you're devoting enough time per day to your craft and to your skills. But it's all about priorities. When one thing comes up, you have another. You got to make sure you choose it based on your priorities, and your priorities got to be set based on your goals, man. So just make sure you have priorities that are in line with your goals. That would be the piece of advice that I have.
For sure, very beautiful advice. Because I remember one time, a true story, one of my buddies gave me. He was at practice, Taft High School practice, and he had to do like some sort of test, but he also had to get to football practice. And he's like, "Hey, coach, I have to make up for this test and all that. I really want to be there for football practice today, but I can't." And he's like, "Kid, focus on the test. We could set up a one-on-one practice later in the week. I could catch you up. The assistant coach could catch you up with what we've been doing with our recent practices. Grades first, academics first, football, sports. It will always be there. Take care of that first." And like you said, prioritization is super important. Let's say a buddy of yours invites you over for a dorm party. Like, "Hey, we're gonna have this really fun dorm party. We would like to come through. Have a good time." But it's just like you also have open library study. For upcoming math exam, you really want to ace. Bump that grade up, and then but you also have let's say a date with your girl. So you have a date. You got a little party. Your homeboy invited you, and then you also have a math exam coming up. So okay, so what do I prioritize first? Okay, math exam first. I don't want my girlfriend to break up with me, so that'll be second. And then we can put the party third and last. So it's all about prioritization, like you said, super important with time management. So that was very beautiful, well-said advice.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
No problem. Of course. Now, when approaching college after high school, was it hard when it came to the process of picking a college? Because there's been times where a student athlete at that stage would have a hard time to pick which college was right for them in terms of academic opportunities, whether it's, programs for sports and whatnot, whatever other programs they're interested in for their career path, and even, the college, campus itself. What would be your best advice to give to students and student athletes when it comes to picking the right college for them? And did you have any difficulties back in the day, picking which college, in terms of, multiple colleges coming your way, like, hey, except yada yada yada, would you like to come to this college? And the other college is like, well, here's what we offer. Was there any sort of difficulties at that time?
I think the only thing that was difficult for me was decommitting from Minnesota and going to Vanderbilt, because Minnesota and that staff was the first staff to offer me. And, I really did like them, thought they were good people and thought I, would have a good chance up there. But, I knew since 11th grade, my first camp at Vanderbilt, that I wanted to go to Vanderbilt. So, that would probably be the hardest thing. And then to answer the second part of that question, I would say to, again, make that list of priorities that you have with a school, and, based on your goals, whether it's whatever you want to do after sports or in sports, or, whether that's facilities, coaching staff, degree programs that they offer, graduation rate, make that list. And when you find that school that fits that criteria, go for it, and you stick to that decision and be committed to it.
Absolutely. I think what you said was beautifully well said, because I think nowadays what's super important is, currently I go to community college. So what I'm trying to do is, start off at community college, save some money, put it to the side, and then, transfer out to a bigger university, possibly, UIC or Northwestern. That's my game plan right now. And I think what you said, like you mentioned, look at, the important things, like you said, the graduation rate, what they offer, what suits you the best, what's like that best feeling for you. And nowadays, what I've noticed with a couple of my friends is they'll typically pick colleges that's like closer to home, so they don't really, go too far. So that could also possibly, be another factor to it,
Yeah.
Obviously, having a family, you don't want to be too far away from it, because, that possibility of getting homesick can happen.
Yeah.
So yeah. I think what you said, that part was actually like very, very interesting. Decommitting Minnesota and then going, to Vanderbilt University. That must have been like a huge, huge step.
Yeah, man. I mean, it was tough, but it was the right decision. It was the right decision. It was tough though, because you build a relationship with coaches and even the people that you're getting recruited with, and to decommit, it sucks, but at the end of the day, it was the best decision.
Absolutely, and that's the most important thing. Whatever is best for us ourselves, for our long-term futures moving forward. So beautifully well said. Now, during your time at Vanderbilt, and more so leading up to your college days. Were there any other hobbies that intrigued you outside of football? Now, I did see that you have a podcast. We will talk about that later in the show, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. The podcast show will be in the link in the description below, on the world of finance and analyzing from a pro athlete's perspective, which is super cool, by the way, as you touch on the importance of it. Did that passion for analysis of finance come before your time at Vanderbilt during the college days, or was it around the time when you got to the NFL?
You know, the finance, you know, I was always interested in it, making money, you know, the different, you know, markets. I got into, you know, crypto when I was in college a little bit. But I definitely think that, you know, being in the league and the importance of managing my money now put me on to finances a little bit more. So I would say that was around my second or third year in the league is when I really got deep into finances.
That's super cool, because you know what it is nowadays is that athletes. It's super cool to hear from an athlete's perspective, because nowadays, it's very insightful when you hear from professors, or when you hear from financial advisors out there, like well-known financial advisors. But to hear from like a pro athlete's perspective, like, hey, this is the day in the life of us, NBA, NFL, NHL, MLB. This is how we manage our money. This is how we approach certain things, and it's crazy because you would have, like, for example, like me and my buddies, we would think like, man, these guys, they get paid hella money. They could probably buy hella things. They could probably buy, half the shopping mall. And then it's just like, well, we also have to look at it a different way, because, regular day people, they also have to manage their money, for their futures, for their families, for themselves. There's a lot that plays into it. So that's why I think it's super cool that, you have a podcast right now, because we get to see from an athlete's perspective of, here's how you manage your money. This is what it's like to market. This is what it's like to invest. This is different types of budgeting. So I think it's super cool that you have that passion, and it comes a lot when you look at it that way from an athlete's perspective.
Yeah, man, it's definitely important. I think it's even more important for athletes because the average NFL career is somewhere around 3 years, right? So say you're lucky and you double that, you play 6. Well, you're still at the high end, at the most, if you double the average, you're going to probably be 28, 29 years old. So you're still going to have to do a lot of living from 29 to retirement age, which is 50, 59 and a half, maybe 65, whatever, right? So you're going to have to fill that gap with something. So you're going to have to put your money away so that it works for you for that long, and have other things that you can pivot into and generate income. So I think that's the most important thing, is understanding that, life in sports ends quickly for professionals, more quickly than a lot of people think. And managing finances is a big, risk management tool. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And like you said, the NFL, that statistic of the 3-year rate. And, it's crazy, because that one injury could really mess up a lot of things. And I'll never forget, one of my coaches, playing basketball growing up, he was telling me hey, if it doesn't work out, have a plan B, have a plan C, have a plan D, because that one injury, and not even just the injury itself, trying to get to the pros itself, I'd imagine is very hard, because you have all these other guys that are uber talented, are uber hungry, that just want to get to the league really bad. But more specifically, the injury thing, because the injury thing is really, really a real life thing. Because there's been many NFL players out there that had so much talent coming to the league, and just like that, it ends. Like, for example, a big time one coming out of college, Robert Griffin III, current analyst for ESPN. With him, I remember I saw one of his interviews, before becoming an analyst, talking about how it was hard for him, that one injury that he had, because coming into the NFL, people were talking about this guy being one of the next best young quarterbacks, and then just like that, little by little, he started to get breakdown, especially because when you get injured in the knees, specifically the knee area, because for me, I tore my ACL and partial MCL last year, and that was super brutal. And then my plan B was okay, well, what do I enjoy? I do like to talk about sports. I love to analyze sports, so why not get into the field of sports media? So if RG3, his plan B was, okay, my career is, basically, over. Not a lot of teams have interest in me at this point. So what do I do now? I already have mine for the game of football, Heisman Trophy winner in college. Let me analyze the game of football. And that was his, big cushion. Like you said, you got to have the cushion. You got to have that plan B, not only to support yourself financially, but also like having like a passion of what you do. And I think having like a plan B and passion of what you do, it goes a long ways. So like for me, sports analysis, for RG3, sports analysis.
Yeah, no. And that's a big part of the podcast too, is, I interview people who have, moved on from football and done things, whether that's in the corporate world, entrepreneurship, things like that. So I think what you're saying is super important. You got to have something that drives you forward and pushes you to do, to do more after you're done playing football, because it ends so early. So you got to live the rest of your life, and it'd be a terrible thing to live the rest of your life without a passion.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. 100% agree. Now, what would you say you remember Vanderbilt the most for when it came to the overall senior year of college? And how would you say they prepared you for the big stage in NFL as a professional athlete? Most importantly, as a member of modern day society, because I feel like nowadays, how do I put it this way? Like the young generation would look at, pro athletes as like, these superheroes, these, super athletes, they have crazy skills, like the Avengers. So, but what some people, fail to realize is, pro athletes are humans just like us. They also have, a home to go to. They have a home, to come and relax with their families, probably, turn on their favorite show of Netflix, wind down, or, get on the podcast, like, for example, your podcast. So how would you say, Vanderbilt University prepared you for the outside world and, the NFL specifically?
I would say, outside world, I had a bunch of, great coaches that, poured into us, not only as football players, but as people. And then, outside of football, I had a lot of really cool professors and, faculty members that, I still tap in with to this day. So I think just being able to learn from them, reach out to them for wisdom is was really helpful for me. And, football wise, I think Coach Mason ran a very pro-like program, taught us a lot of the basics and things that, are, part of pro football, the accountability, the professionalism. I think he taught us how to, build a internal personal system to, get the best out of ourselves. And so I think that's what really helped me be ready for the NFL was, being in that program.
Absolutely. And it's those certain programs and like those certain coaches, teachers, staff members that really help you go a long way. Like I remember like before I graduated high school, like one of my favorite teachers was from like my freshman year of high school. Like my freshman year teacher, and it was in choir, and you always gave like some well thought out advice about the world and how to conduct yourself as a person, how to be at all times professional. And one of my favorite quotes is even treat a janitor like it's like they're a CEO. Like always treat each other the best way you can, the right way. And when you conduct yourself professionally, you could build a lot of good relationships with many different people out there in the real world. And like you said, you talked about Coach Mason, with that program, telling, hey, you guys, this is how, things are supposed to be. This is how you conduct yourself. And this is how you prepare yourself for not only the big stage in the NFL, but, for big jobs and big careers out there you also want to pursue out there.
Absolutely, man.
Yep. Now, I mentioned earlier, I studied your career, and I did see that, correct me if I'm wrong, on the NFL draft year day, you did go up and ended up undrafted in the 2019 draft?
Yep, undrafted to Minnesota Vikings, yep.
Yeah, and now, not too long after the draft, you got picked up by the Vikings. What was the overall feeling coming into that night, going to the draft, and when getting picked up by the Vikings? Describe that feeling as well when you got your first NFL contract.
I mean, it was cool, man. I thought I had a chance to be drafted just off, my numbers and what I did special teams wise and my senior year, everything. But I wasn't, so it was a little disappointment there about not being drafted. But, getting that contract was just, it was cool, man. Just at that point, just to have an opportunity to go into camp, just to be, paid a little bit of money to go to camp, it was cool, man. And I, I was grateful for the opportunity, and I was just gonna make the best of it as I could. So it was cool, man. It was mixed emotions, but it was real cool. It was a real cool time.
Absolutely. Now, I think that NFL draft night or NBA draft night, whatever sports draft night. I think that's probably like I remember an NBA star from back in the day, Jalen Rose, talked about draft day. He's like, you gotta have the suit ready. You got you gotta look sharp for the draft.
Yeah.
And but one of the craziest things about the draft, like you said, you could have like, and that opened my eyes a bit too. Like you could have the most craziest numbers from college entering the draft. You could probably have that confident feeling, like, okay, if I'm not a first rounder, I'm at the very least a second rounder, And I think that I assume that feeling of like not being, drafted opened your eyes up a little bit. Like, man, there's like a lot of competition around here, and I got to, really, really compete, to climb my way up.
Yeah, man. I thought maybe I could be, sixth, seventh round. So yeah, man, I already knew I was gonna have to scratch and claw to make it. But yeah, just having that feeling of not hearing your name called was definitely, it was a wake up call.
And I'm sure it was definitely like, like as you said, like, as you said right now, wake up call, but super motivating. It's like, okay, you know what? It's time to grind. It's time to, really get my name out there. I'm gonna scratch and claw. Like I remember, I believe it was Julius Randle that said in the NBA draft, he was like, they're gonna regret not drafting me a bit higher. They're gonna regret it. And now he's ending up as a very good player for the New York Knicks later on in his career. So I think there's many great examples of like guys being drafted late in the draft or going undrafted. They scratched and clawed, and they still, made a name for themselves. They got paid, and they got to the NFL. But as you mentioned, it was still a good feeling, I'm sure, when you got that call from the Vikings, like, hey, we got a contract for you. And I'm sure as you signed your name to that dotted line, it was like an amazing feeling. Like, okay, now it's time to get to work.
Oh yeah, man. I mean, even from that first call, man, it was just, I always knew I was going to work super hard, man. But it was dope. It was definitely motivated. And 5 years later, here we are.
Absolutely. Now, one of the things I wanted to ask, because I did see you went from Minnesota, then you went to Tennessee, and now you're part of the Chicago Bears. By the way, congratulations on that 2-year extension.
Thank you.
Glad to have you back on the Bears. But there's one thing that really curious me, that really interests me with athletes nowadays, pro athletes. People, nowadays would be like, okay, they'll go to a team, go get traded to a team, based on, what they're interested in, based on the system, chances of winning, the chip. But I feel like also people miss the fact of like, getting adjusted to each different city's culture and, the environment that they have. So how was it for you, adjusting from Minnesota, then to Tennessee, and then to Windy City of Chicago?
Well, I mean, Minnesota, it was, that was a whole learning experience. Just being up there, I'm not gonna lie to you, I didn't really get out much and do much in the city. I probably went out like once or twice. But I mean, that was just, that was a learning experience, strictly football. Tennessee, man, I had been there for college, so I pretty much knew the city, kind of understood, the ins and outs, where to go, where not to go, you know what I'm saying, things like that. So, I mean, transitioning that way, it was still mostly football. The learning curve was mostly football. From Tennessee moving to Chicago, man, just moving from Nashville to a city like Chicago. It's a bigger city, a lot more to do. It was definitely, it wasn't daunting at all. Like, it wasn't overwhelming. I was excited for it. And so, there's still more that I got to go do with my wife and go see. So, it's been fun, man. I think it's all part of the adventure. It's going to different cities, going to different teams, learning your different teammates. I think it's all part of the adventure.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. I think that's very, very beautiful. And I'm glad you broke it down that way because like I said, I feel like people only look at, the chances of, like athletes, when they're like a free agent or, when they get traded to a team. And speaking of free agency, I know obviously you recently signed that 2-year extension with the Bears. Walking through what free agency is like, being a free agent, being out there on the market, how is that process like? Is it, you and your agent work, reaching out to certain teams, or how does the whole process of free agency works?
Well, man, I think it's different for everybody based on, your situation. I really didn't get a chance to hit free agency this year because we did it before free agency opened. But, I did it the year before. For me, it was different. I was just kind of, I was waiting to see, I'm talking about last year, it was, just waiting to see what opportunities came, looking for a new opportunity. a fresh start. So, but I think it's different for everybody, because sometimes people are coming off hot season, sometimes people are coming off not so hot season. So it's different for everybody, but it's it's a little nerve wracking because you're not technically on the team, you don't have a contract,
You're just
you
out
never
there.
you're out there, you just out there, but it's cool though, it's definitely a very unique feeling, and it's cool. It's almost exhilarating. It would be the word. It's a thrill, but it's not all fun. It's not all bad either.
It's a weird feeling of a thrill because you never know. You could probably have like that one phone call, like let's say like maybe it probably could have been from one of your favorite childhood teams, like the Falcons or Eagles. Like, what if the Falcons or Eagles call me up and pick me up? Like, I'm there. Like, sign me up. I'm there. And but yeah, that part of free agency, that is a bit scary. But how you said, how you broke it down, it's a weird it's like a weird feeling of a thrill because yes, you're out there, kind of like in the middle of the nowhere. Like, okay, I'm not on the team right now, really, so I'm really waiting on someone to pick me up. And I want to ask, like, is there like a little of a patience factor? Were there days you were just sort of like anxious, in a way for that phone call?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. That the going through it last year, definitely, But like you say, you gotta be patient, gotta wait it out and see what happens, and just trust that the work you've done and what you put on film will get you a job, and I'm thankful and grateful that it did.
Absolutely. Like a funny analogy, it's like, you're going on the Indeed app, you're applying at a bunch of jobs, or, LinkedIn, you put your resume out there. It's like, okay, now I got to see what job is going on to call me. And then like a week or two passes, like, no one's calling me. Like, what's going on? And you finally get that phone call. It's like, let's go. Like, I finally got a phone call. Here we are. Let's get it running. Now, I've always wanted to ask about, I want to save this question for now. A lot of people talk about like differences between, college basketball to, to pro basketball, college baseball to pro baseball. What are the big differences with college football to pro football? I imagine the pace of the game is definitely, like way higher. So what are the key differences you would say between college football, pro football, and are there possibly any similarities?
A lot of similarities, man. A lot of similarities. It's always, you always have to prepare mentally. So I would say that part of the game is the same, but the urgency with which you got to play at the NFL level is really high. Like you have to be fast off the ball. You have to know you have to be precise. You know what I'm saying? So the urgency and precision, if it's here in college, it's got to be here. So that's what I would say is different.
Wow, I can't even imagine like that first like team meeting, like that first team practice, and walk me through like what was your first practice like in the NFL, and do you have like a welcome to the NFL moment?
I do have a welcome to the NFL moment. It was in Minnesota, and it was the first under the light scrimmage. I was doing well. I had a couple catches, a couple good blocks, but towards the end, I guess I had got lax on my technique, and I got blasted. Man, I got like picked up off my feet. But it was one of those things like you gotta always be on, gotta always be paying attention. And so yeah, that was my welcome to the NFL moment, man. And I don't really remember my first practice. It was probably just all going so fast and just spinning. But yeah, that was my welcome to the NFL moment.
And I don't know what it is, but some of these moments, like it's just like funny in a very cool way because it's like a nice preparation for you. It's like, yeah, you just got whooped, but this should prepare you to to feel what the league is like. Now you touched on teammates. I want to put you on the spot here, but do you have a couple of like your favorite teammates from Minnesota to Tennessee and currently in Chicago?
Yeah, man. A lot of guys have helped me along the way. So Minnesota, CJ Ham. I mentioned this probably more than I should, but he's a great guy. I still talk to him to this day. Really good mentor. Tennessee. I still talk to Derek. Darrington. A lot of those guys. Amani Hooker, Dane Crookshank. I got a lot of guys that I'm cool with from every team, and then from the Bears this past season, everybody was tight. Khalil, Darrington was back in the room, T-Eb, the whole running back room, Demo, that's my guy. And then just all over the team, Nick Morrow was my guy. We sat by each other in meetings, chopping it up. Just a lot of guys I'm missing a lot of good guys. Byron Pringle, uh, just a lot of really cool dudes. So yeah, man, a lot of great dudes that I play with, and I know I'm forgetting a lot of them, but I got a lot of good connections and relationships that I've made.
Absolutely, and I think it's beautiful to to still maintain connections like you mentioned, CJ Ham, very good player, and I think it's very important to keep that connection, to keep that bond, because one of the few things I look at it this way is when you have like a mentor like that when you first come to the NFL, that's like a nice warming welcoming feeling I can imagine, and then they give you all the in and outs, like, hey, this is what it's like in the locker room. This is what it's like after the game. This is what it's like when we get blown out by this team. This is how the coach is gonna rip us apart. So I think it's very important. How important is it in a way to kind of like pick people's brains? Like for example, you mentioned like Derrick Henry, top level running back in the NFL. So what is it like to hearing advice from some big time players and kind of like picking their brains to kind of implement it to your game?
Yeah, man, I think it's always important to have people to model your game after and to model like your processes and your systems after. What do you do before a game? What do you do after the game as far as massage? So I think that's very important for your growth, and I did that a lot with CJ, a lot in Tennessee, D Hen, and a lot of those veterans. So I think that's super important. And I just want to let you know I probably got about 10 more minutes that I can do.
For sure, man. Absolutely,
Okay.
no problem, no problem, no problem.
I know they. Can cut that out. So
No problem, no problem. Now, I do want to really dive into your podcast. I really do. I have a few questions about your podcast. The first thing I want to ask about the game and the world of finance is the importance behind budgeting and setting that budget. How important is it to set a budget? Because let's say, for example, you get that big paycheck, and some are most likely are to go crazy on like that paycheck, and not really game plan what to do with that check. So what does budgeting mean entirely to you, and what do you remember doing for your first NFL check, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, my first NFL check was only $6,410. So I got a signing bonus of $10,000 from Minnesota, and I only saw $6,400 of it because of taxes. So that's the first thing. But outside of that, man, I had so many expenses. I had to just put it up in savings and save it for expenses. I didn't have my car in Minnesota, so I had to get a rental car. Then I had to get an apartment. So I just had to tuck it away. And then to speak to the importance of budgeting, man, I think the most important thing about budgeting is tracking how much you're spending every month. That's like, imagine you're driving in a car with no speedometer, right? And you go over the speed limit, you get a ticket, right? Feel like overspending and doing things like that, it all becomes a problem because you don't know how fast you're going. You don't know how much you're spending. So checking how much you're spending every month is important. So you have a real tangible feel on, okay, I think I only spend $2,500 a month, but I actually spend $4,500 a month. So if you don't, you got to be able to track everything out so that you can then project out 10, 12 months or 12 months to 2 years. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And one of the first things I learned about budgeting, it was like, it sounds pretty fundamental and probably sounds a bit generic, but my pops was like, wants and needs. Like this is what you gotta look at, wants and needs. So like currently, back, like I have iPhone 14 right now, but back in the day, I had this, iPhone 7 for like many, many years. And around that time, it was when like the iPhone XR came out. I was like, oh, I really want this phone. I'm gonna go get it. My pops just looks at me, is like, do you really need that phone or do you just want it? I'm like, what do you mean by that? Like, I want it. He's like, exactly. You don't need the phone. Is your phone working well? Oh, yeah. Call me right now. And then I'm like, okay. I'm like, you can hear me, right, Dad? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, so it's working, right? He's like, well, yeah.
Yeah.
So he's like, so you don't need a new phone. My dad's super old school European. So he's like, you don't need a new phone. Wants and need, that's a part of budgeting, I imagine.
It all goes back to priorities, right? So you say wants and needs, to me, that's priorities. What's your priorities? Like if you have a goal to clean out debt, then your money doesn't go to wants. It goes to cleaning out that debt. So if you have a goal to building your emergency fund, it doesn't go to wants. It goes to building that emergency fund. If you have a goal to invest, some of it may go to wants, but then a lot of it needs to go to investing. And, you have to go to the needs first and then take care of some of the wants. but all in proportion, right? All in proportion.
I just wanted to get that like known down because financial expert. I really want to because I really want to get into
I'm
more of financial literacy.
I'm not an expert, man. I just read a lot and I try to study a lot, man. That's
Hey,
all.
hey, you know what? Like from watching one of your videos, I just want to give like a huge compliment. Like it does seem like you're a financial expert because yes, you are saying that you're still learning about it, but like we mentioned earlier, to speak from a pro athlete's perspective, it really like means a lot to people like me because then we could see it from a pro athlete's perspective on what it's like, to budget your money, what's it like to invest, what's it like to look at the stock market. I'm a rookie. I didn't really have that, honor and, privilege to really learn about financial literacy in my high school. And, I'm starting to slowly learn it in the current college I go to. So I think, like I said, it's super dope that you have that, a Business of Athletes podcast. And what came about with that podcast? What inspired you to start up that podcast?
I think two things would be one, my passion for personal finance and what it's done for me financially and the things that I've been able to do with my money just simply from learning and reading and researching. And then two, having that passion outside of sports. I've been blessed to meet a lot of people who have built great businesses, who have done great things in their professional lives outside of their sport. And so highlighting their stories, I really wanted to provide a platform to highlight their stories. Everybody talks about, the guys who make millions and millions of dollars and then make the great investment like Kobe with I think it was body armor, right? But then there are guys who don't make millions but still make fantastic, like really great investments. So it was about highlighting those stories as well.
Absolutely. I think that's super, super beautiful. And it like for athletes and even for like even celebrities out there, like we talked about earlier, the plan B, once you retire, let's say you have like this little injury or something came up, you got to have like the little cushion, maybe, start up your own company, maybe real estate. I know Gerald Henderson, former NBA player, he's a part of real estate now, and he has his little, company and business now surrounding, real estate. So I think stuff like that is super important. And one of the few things, one of the last few questions I wanted to ask, one of my personal favorite episodes from your podcast was when you had Braden Comp on, the man behind the pivot, which was super cool. Now, I found you guys' conversation very interesting, and I love the part you did a 2-minute shot clock on Braden to explain the basics of stock and the stock market game. From my personal experience coming from high school, I wasn't really taught, like I mentioned earlier, about financial literacy and certain terms and words to know about. How much value do you feel the stock market holds today? And how important is it to understand the stock market game and build the experience of investing in stocks and understanding the whole definition of investing and investment in itself?
I think it's very important. I think education and having a baseline of knowledge on, the stock market is one of the biggest creators of millionaires in our economy in America. So I think just understanding how they do it, right? Because you hear that and then you think, oh, somebody made one investment and became a millionaire. But really a lot of millionaires became millionaires because they worked their jobs and they invested a small portion uh, of their earnings every month for 30 years. And that's how they did it. And now they retired, right? So just understanding how they did it, how the game is played, I think that's huge, man. I think that's one of the most important things that we can do because like you said, there's a lot of different things you can do. You can invest in real estate. You can invest in stocks. You can invest in creating your own business. You can invest in crypto, And so if you do the education, you do the research, you can find what works for you and what fits for you and your own personal risk profile and risk management.
Absolutely. And like one of the last few questions, going back to your first video on Business Office, you had a part in the episode where Marcus Russell asked you about the NFL pay schedule for a pro athlete. I know you mentioned earlier your first paycheck was $6,400.
Yeah.
For a pro athlete, how important is it for you to invest your money and take care of it throughout your career as time progresses? And for the audience of viewers, describe what it's like for the NFL pay schedule in the life of an NFL player.
Well, we get paid over 35 weeks, so it was just the season 18 weeks. They cut it in half and spread it out over 35. So that's how we get paid, man. And yeah, man, I would just say the importance is like for a lot of us, it'll be the last time we get this opportunity to earn this amount of money in this short amount of time. So the importance of protecting it, of knowing what to do with it, with wisdom and discernment, is, I mean, it's one of the most important things that we can focus on, and that's why I talk about it on my page. That's why we focus on how we do, because it's so important, man. You don't want to look back 5 years after being out of the league and not know, not know what happened, and not have a grasp on, and squander the opportunity pretty much.
Right on, right on. And lastly, what is the end goal with this show business of athletes? And of course, your passion to expand the mind on financial field. And I think it's super important to learn about finance today, especially because you can never know when the economy could possibly go down. God forbid. Obviously we've seen that before. So how important is it to understand financial literacy? How important is it for you to keep on expanding the show business of athletes, and of course your own mindset on financial literacy? Because the way I look at finance, it's like a chess scheme, man. Like how you mentioned, learning off, different financial advisors, having different people on your show. It's like how we talked about, teammates. You get to pick their brains a bit. You get to, implement it to your notes. And like a little side question, side question to this last one. What would be your advice to people to start off the best way to learn about finance? Whether it's, taking an online course, just, doing your little own research, watch a couple YouTube videos. How would you start off on that?
Okay, so I'm gonna say a few different resources. I would say, one, start tracking everything you spend. That is the first thing that you can do, because then you'll start to see, oh, I spend too much money here, or you'll see, I'm getting a lot more than I thought I was, and I can save a lot more. So that would be the first thing. The second thing would be, get on Investopedia. There's a website called Investopedia. All different type of terms out there on Investopedia. Go watch people like Earn Your Leisure. Tap in with Mark. You mentioned Mark from the Better Wallet. Jeremy Schneider from Personal Finance Club. I learned from him about just simple index investing. Man, watch CNBC. Just turn it on. Just invest time in it, because you'll begin to learn it by osmosis. Like you'll start picking up different terms and figuring things out. And so you can take those courses I mentioned: Better Wallet, Jeremy Schneider Personal Finance Club. You can watch Earn Your Leisure, Bigger Pockets. That's a real estate podcast. And really just taking information. There's a lot of people out here giving really good information. And that's what I would say, man. Start tracking those finances, and then just start learning as much as you can as fast as possible, and just trying to execute it.
Beautifully well said. Beautifully well said. Ladies and gentlemen, that will be the end of the episode. Khari, thank you so much for giving your time. For me, for someone who's trying to grow their name in sports journalism, sports analysis, for you to be the first pro athlete on, it's a great feeling, man. It's a great freaking feeling, and even more cool, a Chicago Bear. Whoop the Packers this season.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
But any last things you want to say before the episode ends, man? Once again, I appreciate you for coming on. Thank you.
Hey, man, thank you for having me, man. Y'all can find me personally, Khari Blasingame on Twitter, KB_23 on Instagram, and Business of Athletes is my business page on Instagram, man. So, and YouTube. So I appreciate you having me, man. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, man, and I hope you enjoyed the show today. I hope you really enjoyed the time today. We definitely had some fun. And guys, remember, like Khari said, everything will be in a link in the description, so be sure to check him out, show support. And as always, we'll see you guys next time in the deep end.